the whole point of schooling is to teach children how to think, not what to think. That's kind of a very basic tenet of education, I would have thought, that you are exposed to a whole variety of information. You're taught incontrovertible facts that we know that are demonstrated to be provably true, in nature. And you're taught, if you are exposed to subjective viewpoints, it's in a setting of debate, let's say, where you can take one position and somebody else takes another, and you have to learn how to defend your view and not straw man your opposite, things like that. That's about the only real room you could have for that sort of subjective view. And when it comes to this issue, we could get into the validity and the legitimacy of some of the more apocalyptic climate projections and whether those are realistic and the planet is actually going to be burnt to a cinder in 5 minutes. I could get into that. Whenever you start getting into that, people start saying, oh, well, where's your climate degree? Trust the experts, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine.
Now you're doing your dopamine detox, I would say you're especially qualified to comment on the state of your surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably perceiving things that I'm on like another level, another plane of existence.
You can hear the ice caps melting.
Yeah. But with all that said, they're going to push back if you start getting into the scientific argument and questioning the data. So let's just give it to them for the sake of argument and say, yes, every single thing you say is correct. Man-made climate change is destroying the world and we're all about to die. Okay, grand. Still, it is a subjective point to start prescribing a policy solution to that. What is the answer to those particular problems? That's a matter of personal opinion. You have lunatics like Extinction Rebellion who want to glue themselves to planes and they think that that's an appropriate way to go about it, or smash windows and engage in criminal damage and vandalism. And then you have somebody like Eamon Ryan who wants to go into government and try to fix things through policy and passing legislation. And so there's a whole range of directions you can go within that. So even granting them absolutely everything, even if we fully accepted the climate alarmist worldview, that still would not justify teaching kids and directing them on how to go about fixing problems in society. That's not the job of education. It just isn't.
Well, certainly. And, there was, even aside from the documents that I received, there is a lot of sort of talk around it as to how do they phrase it, the affective dimension of the subject, which is that it will, this subject will likely stimulate some eco-anxiety, as they put it, in students and things like that. And which, I would also say is inappropriate, but we're far beyond that, unfortunately. But there was also, in one of the documents I received, there was a line about how, it was something along the lines of, students will be, let me find it because this is complicated stuff and you don't necessarily to get it wrong. But it said something to the effect that a subject like this will promote harmony and, or the way the subject is conveyed is that it will promote harmony and get everyone on the same page into relation to all of these things. Whereas it's much more likely that what this will do is stoke division in school communities in relation to things that aren't directly connected to climate, you would think. So it was saying that it might stoke division in relation to 6th-year holidays. And I read this, the students who take this might start taking issue with all the other students who go away on planes at the end of the year and things like this. The students who take this might start taking issue with going on school trips and whatnot. So just as you say, sort of this, rosy worldview where, everyone's on the same page about what to do and we're all unified in climate action. Whereas the much more likely outcome of this is, division. It's, division in terms of, promoting activism and through that sort of civil disobedience. It's division in school communities between the students who, end up taking this and then start thinking it's inappropriate for their fellow students to be going on 6th-year holidays. It's sorry to
interrupt, but Elon Musk, people associate him with the rightest of the right, like he's this far right lunatic or whatever. Elon Musk is a climate change guy. Every single thing that he's done in his career, in the last decade or so, at least, has been oriented towards overcoming climate change as a threat to humanity because he fully believes in that. That's why he rolled out electric cars and popularized them with Tesla. That's why a lot of, I don't know if a lot of people know this, the reason he's obsessed with colonizing Mars and other planets is not just because he thinks that'd be a cool thing to do, although I'm sure he does think it's cool. It's specifically so that if and when humanity finds some way to annihilate our own planet because we're such idiots, that we will have a backup plan and that there will be people living on another, planetary body, that the Earth is not our only basket that we have all of our eggs in. So my point being, the only reason I bring that up is that is a proposed solution to climate change. He's not even saying everybody needs to try and run around gluing themselves to this or gluing themselves to that, or increase your taxes to the point where poor people can't afford to turn on their heating. He wants to explore other planets and shoot rockets off into space. So the range of discussion you can have, even within their worldview, is enormous. And to act like it is confined to some kind of very narrow, specific set of policies that we all agree on is just laughable. I know I'm just reiterating what we said, but I think it's worth reinforcing the point.
It's important to do so because it's crazy. As I said, this is going to be rolled out in a select number of schools come September. And if I remember correctly, this subject to correction on this, it'll be rolled out sort of to all schools come 2027 or so. So it's an important one, and it's because school is, again, say, traditionally understood as being important because we put all of our young people through it, and it's where they come into contact with ideas, and it's where traditionally they were sort of intellectually formed and things like this. Whereas, as that RT article even noted itself, this is a departure for traditional school subjects. This to include an element on particularly just even aside from the climate ideas themselves, to include an element of activism, because activism just implies that this is the right thing to do, and don't why would you question it? It's like the planet's dying, so we all have to get out there and get busy, which is just it's just crazy to me that this passed all of the whatever checks they have in the background. I mean, as I say, when you have a sort of look into the consultation process as we did, it's not that hard to see why it was sort of shooed along, because there's clearly a lot of you would say stakeholders in favor of something like this, and I suppose to hell with the people who don't think it's a good idea from the off. But so I would encourage people to go read the article, because there's a lot more in there than we even spoke about here, and I just really think this is a very important one, because as I described it at the beginning, I think this subject is a bit of a watershed moment, in that there's never been a subject, to my knowledge, like this before in Irish schools. And I think if it's just allowed to slide, it sort of opens the door to all sorts of potential, just taking ideas, I would say bad ideas, for granted as right and true, and telling students to act on the basis of those ideas rather than to consider them.